Hey there, this is Ryan Kingsline. I want to show you how to quickly sculpt an ear. Sculpting an ear is no different than anything else. You can do it very quickly if you focus on just a few identifying essentials. But that's really the problem that we have as people learning to sculpt. We have all of this noise going on inside of our minds as we are looking at the form and trying to understand the shape of things. And then as we progress, that noise starts to settle down and become quieter, and we're able to actually quickly just get straight to the core of this. So I'm going to start this process off with a sphere. Let's turn our floor off, symmetry is on, move brush is active, and I'm just going to create a bit of a disc. Look at this from a side view, and I'm going to establish the characteristic shape and the slightly backwards leaning focus of the ear. A little kidney bean. Nothing too special about it. Then once we've done this, we need to go in and establish those essential characteristics that I talked about. So I'm going to identify a few of them. So in the upper part of the ear we have the helix and the antihelix. These are the two really important elements relating to the top of the ear. The bottom, the tragus and the antitragus, are on other sides, opposite sides of each other. You can really get a clear sense of the tragus, the antitragus, and the boundary of the helix if you just pull in this little, almost this kidney stone shape here. Just push that in. Let's turn symmetry off for that and just pull straight along. Then I'm going to just smooth out one side of that. Smooth out the other side. And I'm being careful. I'm not just randomly smoothing this out. It's very specific what I'm doing. I'm trying to use my smooth brush to establish planes. Okay, in with the clay brush. First thing I like to do is separate the helix and the antihelix. And this thing's going to come all the way around and insert right into the corner of the ear. So I'm going to press the Alt key, start to separate them. And start to get a sense of that overlap as the antihelix disappears underneath the helix. Get a sense of it over here as well. Add a little bit of volume right there. Okay. Then in with Trim Dynamic, just to help me flatten that plane. Smooth it around a little bit. Might press Alt, build up. You know, a little back and forth, never hurt. So that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm essentially pushing the antihelix underneath the helix. But then the next thing that I'm going to do, come into the antihelix, and I'm going to build up this corner here. Now the ear has a lot of variety depending on the person. But one thing I want to do is make sure that from the side view the antihelix is coming out. So actually I'm going to build up a lot more. Yeah. There we go. That's a little better. And that's going to require that I build this up a little bit so it's not so steep of a slope. And come back in with Trim Dynamic. And there we go. So that's roughed in. Now let's go in and get the helix and the tragus separated. Standard brush, I'm going to cut across with a clay brush. And we want to get that helix to wrap in and go underneath the anti-helix. Use the move brush. Okay, pretty simple. I'm going slow. I go a lot faster than this when I'm actually sculpting. But I want to make sure that we're very clear and that you're seeing me take time with these individual parts and features. Okay, tragus and the anti-tragus. Just going to build up form on one side. Build up form on the other side. Notice I smooth occasionally. And then build this connector. Okay. Being careful. All right. Some simple planes, and we're almost there, believe it or not. That's really the large parts of the form have already been defined. I'm just going to flatten this so that it sits right there on the side of the head. And let's just smooth it out. Yep. Okay. Now, last thing I'm going to do in terms of just this profile, come in with a standard brush. And I want to separate the helix and the anti-helix here and take this line down. About right there. Okay, pull our form up and around. Give that a little bit of a lip. Give the lobe a little bit of its shape. Let's lower our subdivision level, and I'm going to randomly smooth in places just to start to give it a little bit of the cut, bent kind of look that the ear gets. I'm also going to really smooth the back side. But when I smooth the back side, I want to be careful smoothing the front. So I'm going to go into Brush, Auto Mask, turn back face masking on. That'll protect that front side. The opposite side, sorry. Okay, smooth, smooth, smooth. At any time, I can just come in, flatten that if I want to. Switch back to the standard brush, sorry, the move brush. And I'm just creating that offset. Notice how it gets thicker up here towards the top, thinner as it gets closer to the skin, the side of the face. It's thicker up at top, thinner down here. So using the move brush just to be very clear about this. Again, when I'm sculpting, I would probably be hacking away with the clay brush. Okay. Now, at this point, the job that's left to us is to simply define what we have here more specifically. So I'm going to use the clay brush, dig in a bit. Might as well divide the model. Use a standard brush. Really push in underneath to get a nice sense of overlap. Can also use the inflate brush in certain areas, like here at the top. Inflate that over the overhang, but then come back in with trim dynamic, and that lets you just flatten it, gives you that kind of bent ear look. If you keep the divisions in mind, the simple divisions of the helix, anti-helix, then you're going to be in a really good position to just make sure to take total control of the sculpt. Right now, all we're really doing is just coloring it. We're just establishing the specific variety of its turning from one plane to another. I think this was a little weak, so I'm building this up with the trim dynamic. Just one of the tools that I like to really like to use. Creates a nice flat quality. Very sculptural. Let's go in and define this conch shell a little bit better. And make it a little less thick. It's quite meaty. Okay. Then we're going to come in at the back and just trim some of this a bit. I'm going to make sure to get all the way down to that place where the anti-helix changes planes and becomes the helix. Try not to cut that edge out though. You still want that nice strong dominant shape. Okay, and then add a little bit of form here for the lobe. I'm just going to cut that back as the helix turns into the lobe of the ear. Just use the move brush to adjust that a bit. And trim dynamic to just enforce that plane. Now I'm going to show you something else here in just 2 seconds. I'm going to show you the trim adaptive brush. It's going to be a really good one here for the ear. BTA. It's going to allow us to take a plane like we have here and just enforce that, push that into the model. Or take this side plane and start to cut into it a little bit. Okay, and this is going to help us create a little bit stronger planar shapes in some cases. Come back in, get rid of some of the stronger planes, and we're largely finishing at this point. So I'm just curving the cartilage here a little bit more of the anti-helix. Might come in with the clay brush and just give that a bit of a rounded edge. Concave edge is what I mean to say. Yeah, there we go. And then let's pull the shape around just a bit. Great thing about ears is you can just beat them up and they just look better. Lobe's a little bit too big in relationship, but that'll all start to make sense once you put it on a face as well. Last thing I'm going to do here is just make sure that this helix has the correct slope backwards. Inflate brush. And then the trim dynamic brush should just cut that down. Okay, and with that, not a lot of work. Some things that we could definitely correct, and that I think I need to correct actually right away. Need to pull that in. There we go. There. That's how I would sculpt an ear. So I'm starting out thinking about 4 different forms: helix, antihelix, tragus, antitragus, and then moving it from there to defining the conch, the internal shell, developing the antihelix and how it is sloping down underneath the helix, and then developing the sides of the tragus and antitragus, and all the while adjusting the form of this ear as needed. So I hope that was useful.